It was one of those stormy nights you'd rather spend curled up in bed than anywhere else. But there I was, driving down that familiar winding road home. That night, after what felt like the longest nursing shift ever, all I wanted was to get home and crash into bed. The rain was relentless, pouring down like a million tiny hammers against my car. The road, usually so familiar, felt different in the storm. It was like I was driving it for the first time. All I could hear were the thick raindrops falling on my car and my wipers screeching, trying their best to clear my view. I've driven this road 100 times, but that night it was like driving through a different world. Everything was shadows and whispers in the rain. I kept telling myself, just a little longer, Sarah, you're almost home. But deep down, in that lonely stretch of road, I couldn't shake off a strange feeling. As I drove, the storm seemed to grow angrier, the rain beating harder against my car. Then, through the blurry veil of water, I saw a figure on the side of the road. It was a man, completely drenched from head to toe, thumb outstretched, hoping for a ride. I slowed down, my heart torn. It's not safe to pick up strangers. Leaving someone out in this storm, though, didn't feel right either. After a moment's hesitation, my hand reached for the door lock, and I pulled over. "Thanks for stopping," he said as he got in, his voice almost lost in the sound of the rain. He introduced himself as Mark. He looked harmless enough, but there was something about him that made me feel uneasy. His clothes were soaked, and he shivered from the cold. As we drove, Mark talked about the storm like it was an old friend of his. He made strange comments about how he knew the area well, and how storms can change things, or people. His words were like riddles, making little sense to me. His gratitude slowly turned into something more unsettling, a kind of eeriness that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Then, out of nowhere, Mark asked me to stop the car. We were in the middle of the woods, far from any houses or lights. Just trees and the dark, wet road. "Here is good," he said, pointing to a spot that looked like any other part of the forest. I couldn't understand why he would want to get out here, in the middle of nowhere, especially in this storm. I stopped the car, my mind racing with questions. Mark thanked me and stepped out into the rain, disappearing quickly into the night. I sat there for a moment, trying to shake off the fear that clung to me like the cold. I told myself I did the right thing, helping someone in need. But as I drove away, leaving the spot where I left Mark, I couldn't help but feel that something was not right. Just when I thought my night couldn't get any worse, my car started making a strange noise, and then, all of a sudden, it just stopped. Nothing I did could get it to start again. There I was, alone in the dark, stormy woods, with my heart pounding so loud I could hear it. I felt a knot of fear in my stomach. I was stuck, and I knew it. I grabbed my phone to call for help, but something else caught my attention. There was a news article about people who had gone missing in these very woods. The most recent case was about someone who looked just like Mark. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Was it just a creepy coincidence, or was there something more to it? As I was trying to make sense of it all, I heard something outside. It sounded like footsteps crunching on the wet leaves. I was too scared to look. My imagination was running wild, thinking about who or what could be out there in the dark, just beyond the reach of my car's headlights. I knew I had to get out of there fast. Without wasting another second, I slammed my foot on the accelerator. The car lurched forward, but then, with a loud bang, it jerked to a stop. My tire popped. I went into full panic mode. I was sure the hitchhiker had something to do with it. He must have sabotaged my car when I wasn't looking. My mind raced with fear as I frantically checked that all the doors were locked. I was trapped in my car, in the middle of nowhere, with a possible maniac lurking outside. I squinted through the windows, straining my eyes to see any movement in the pitch-black night. Every shadow seemed like it could be him, every sound a potential threat. My breath fogged up the glass as I peered into the darkness, trying to locate where he might be hiding, waiting to attack. Then, to make matters even more terrifying, my car's lights started flickering, and then just went out. I felt like I had gone blind as everything suddenly went black. As my eyes adjusted, I could barely see my own hands in front of my face. The sounds outside seemed closer now, more real and more frightening. Just when I thought things couldn't get any scarier, I saw headlights in the distance. A vehicle was coming my way. At first, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe it was someone who could help. But then, I remembered the news article. Maybe Mark was part of a bigger plan. My hope turned to fear. Who was in that car? What did they want? Were they coming to help me? Or was I in more danger than ever? My heart was racing, and I felt a cold sweat on my skin. I didn't know what was going to happen next, and that was the most terrifying thing of all. With my heart racing and my hands shaking, I knew I couldn't just sit there in the dark, scared and helpless. I had to do something. So I took a deep breath, grabbed my phone, and opened the car door. The rain was pouring down so hard it was like walking into a shower. I stepped out into the storm, determined to find a way out of this nightmare. As I stood there trying to figure out what to do next, I saw the mysterious vehicle that had been approaching. It had stopped not too far from me. My heart was in my throat as I watched the driver's door open. Who could it be? I braced myself for the worst. But then, out stepped a man in a raincoat holding a flashlight. It was the tow truck driver from the local garage. I remembered him from earlier when I filled up my car after my shift. He tried to get me to reconsider going on the road in this weather, but I assured him that I could handle it. I couldn't believe it was him. He explained that he was worried about me driving on such a stormy night. So he followed me at a distance, just in case I ran into any trouble. And there he was, right when I needed help the most. He calmly hooked my car to his truck and helped me onto the passenger's side of the truck before getting in himself. As we drove off, I couldn't help looking around, afraid that somehow Mark had climbed onto the truck or into my car to follow us. I only felt relief once we reached the town, and it was clear that we were safe. I thanked the tow truck driver over and over. I couldn't believe that he had gone out of his way to help me. I was so grateful for his kindness, and it made me see that even in scary situations, there are good people willing to help. As I drove in a taxi back to the hospital where I would spend the night, I thought about everything that had happened. I was safe now, but the night's events left a big impression on me. I realized how important it is to be careful, but also how kindness from strangers can make a huge difference in our lives. After that night, I knew I'd never forget the tow truck driver's unexpected but life-saving help. I work at this old diner on the edge of town. It's the kind of place where truckers would stop for a quick bite and a strong cup of coffee to keep them awake for miles ahead. It is a bit of a relic, but it's got its charm, especially for a loner like me. On this particular night, it really was just me and the sound of the pouring rain pounding against the windows. The clock ticked past midnight and the diner was empty, save for the hum of the old radio I kept behind the counter. It played those classic hits that seemed to blend into the background, perfect for nights like this. I busied myself with the usual routine, wiping down tables, restocking condiments, and ever so often, peering out the rain-streaked windows into the parking lot. Not that I expected many customers on a night like this. Thinking about brewing another pot of coffee just to keep busy, I heard it, the gravel crunching in the parking lot. A car pulling up? I wiped my hands on my apron and moved towards the window, expecting to see a customer braving the storm for a late-night snack. But as I looked out, all I saw was an old, beat-up car parked at an odd angle, its headlights off and windows fogged up. I waited for a moment, expecting the door to open and a drenched customer to rush in, seeking refuge and maybe a hot cup of coffee. But the car just sat there, silent and still. Probably just someone changing their mind about braving the rain. I muttered to myself, turning back to my chores. It wasn't the first time a driver had second thoughts about stopping at a lonely diner in the middle of a stormy night. After a while, I looked out the window to see if the car was still there. As I stood there, squinting through the rain, My eyes struggled to adjust to the darkness outside. The diner's neon sign, flickering in the storm, cast a dim, eerie glow on the parking lot. That's when I noticed it, a dark figure moving just beyond the reach of the light. It was hard to make out details, but it looked like someone was out there pacing back and forth, and the car seemed to be gone. This wasn't normal. In all my years working here, I'd never seen anything quite like this. My first thought was to go out and check. Maybe someone needed help, but something about the situation felt off. The figure seemed to be deliberately staying in the shadows, almost as if they were trying to avoid being seen. I decided to play it safe. Locking the front door, I watched from behind the counter, keeping my eyes fixed on the mysterious figure. Minutes passed, but they didn't attempt to come in or move towards the light, just pacing, back and forth, like a caged animal. Then suddenly the figure stopped. They stood still for a moment and I held my breath, waiting for their next move. But instead of coming towards the diner, they turned and disappeared into the rain and darkness. I let out a sigh, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling. Probably just a lost traveler or a local out for a strange walk, I told myself, though the thought did little to comfort me. I went back to my chores, trying to focus on the familiar routine of the diner. But the image of the dark figure lingered in my mind, unsettling me more than I cared to admit. As the night wore on, the storm intensified, and the diner felt more isolated than ever. I tried to lose myself in the mundane tasks, but realized I was now aware of every creak and groan of the old building. It was going to be a long night, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was far from over. Suddenly, there was a knock at the back door. Sharp and urgent. It caught me so off guard. I jumped. Cautiously, I approached the door, peering through the small window. But there was nobody there, just the relentless rain and darkness. As I turned away, confused and on edge, a loud crash echoed through the diner. It sounded like breaking glass. My pulse raced. This was no ordinary night. Someone, or something, was out there. I needed to protect myself. I scrambled through the kitchen, my hands shaking as I searched for anything I could use as a weapon. My fingers closed around a heavy frying pan. Not ideal, but it would have to do. Heart pounding, I crept towards the source of the noise, the diner now feeling like a maze of shadows and uncertainty. The sound of my own breathing seemed deafening in the silence that followed the crash. As I rounded the corner, I saw it. A broken window, shards of glass scattered on the floor, rain pouring in. I barely had time to process this when I heard it. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from the front of the diner. Someone was inside. Panic surged through me. I needed a hiding place. Fast. I ducked into the storage closet, squeezing behind stacks of supplies, gripping the frying pan tightly. The footsteps grew louder, closer. I held my breath, praying not to be found. The closet door creaked open, and I could see a shadow looming in the doorway. My heart was in my throat. The intruder stepped closer, and I knew I had to act. Gathering all my courage, I jumped out from behind the boxes and yelled, swinging the frying pan as hard as I could. But the intruder moved fast. He dodged my swing and grabbed my arm tightly. The frying pan fell to the floor with a loud noise, and I was left with no weapon. We fought hard, pushing and pulling each other. He was really strong, but I was fighting to protect myself. We bumped into shelves and boxes and stuff fell all around us. Every time I tried to get away, he held on tighter, trying to hold me down. I hit him a few times, trying to make him let go, but he didn't seem to care. He pushed back harder, breathing heavily. We moved around the small room, knocking over more things. We were both trying to get the upper hand in the fight. It was during one frantic moment, as we grappled and twisted, that I felt a sharp blow to the side of my head. A searing pain shot through me. My vision blurred, and a ringing filled my ears. The last thing I remember was the intruder standing over me, and then everything went black. I woke up on the cold floor, my head pounding like nothing I'd ever felt before. For a moment, I was disoriented, trying to piece together what had happened. As my vision cleared, I noticed the mess around me. Shelves toppled over, supplies scattered everywhere. Then it hit me. The struggle, the intruder, the blow to my head. I slowly got to my feet, my head throbbing with every movement. That's when I saw the extent of the damage. The TV behind the counter was gone, and the cash registers were open and empty. Panic set in as I realized we'd been robbed. Stumbling to the front, I found the door wide open, banging back and forth in the fierce wind and rain. Outside, in the dim light of dawn, I could see tire marks on the wet ground, signs of a car speeding away. It all made sense now. The intruder, the attack. It was all a setup for a robbery. I reached for the phone with shaky hands and called the cops. They arrived as the storm was letting up, their lights cutting through the morning mist. I explained everything, still trying to wrap my head around the night's events. The officers checked the diner's security cameras. The footage showed it all, the intruder who fought me, and his accomplice who sneaked in with a gun. They worked quickly, grabbing whatever they could before making their escape. As I watched the footage, a chilling realization washed over me. I was incredibly lucky to have been knocked out when I was. If I had stayed conscious, if I had tried to fight back or stop them, things could have ended much worse for me. The thought was terrifying. I had just finished my cleaning job at the mall, a big building all by itself near the highway outside of town. My hands were still a bit wet and smelled like the cleaning stuff as I locked the mall's back door. I walked to my car in the almost empty parking lot. I threw my bag in the back seat, settled behind the wheel and put on my safety belt. But then, my car wouldn't start. Great, I said to myself, trying the keys in the ignition, but the car just made a tired sound and didn't start. I looked at my watch. It was really late, way past when most buses stop running. But I remembered, there was one last bus, the late night route. I grabbed my bag and walked to the highway, where the small old bus stop was barely lit by a dim streetlight. The rain was getting worse and my socks were getting wet in my old shoes. I don't really like traveling alone at night, especially on a bus. But what choice did I have? I needed to get home, and even if I could get someone to come out here at this time of night, it would take forever. Standing under the bus shelter, with the rain dripping down, I tried to shake off the bad feeling in my stomach. It's just a bus ride, I said to myself, trying to sound brave. But it was so dark. The kind of dark that seems to hide everything, even the sound of the rain. I waited for the last bus, the seconds feeling like minutes. Finally, the bus came, creaking as it stopped in front of me. I climbed on, dripping wet. The bus driver didn't say anything, not even a hello. He just looked straight ahead like I wasn't there. I found it a bit weird, but I didn't say anything either. I just walked down the aisle and found a seat near the middle. As the bus started moving, I realized I was the only one on it. It was just me and the driver. The sound of the rain hitting the bus was loud and the windows were all foggy. I wiped one with my sleeve to look outside, but it was so dark I couldn't see much. Then, something strange happened. The bus turned onto a road I didn't know. I ride this bus a lot, and it never goes this way. I leaned forward, trying to see the street signs, but they were all blurry in the rain. My heart started to beat a little faster. Where was this bus going? I reached for my phone, thinking I could use it to see where we were, but when I pressed the power button, nothing happened. My phone was dead. I couldn't call anyone, couldn't check the map. I felt a knot in my stomach. That's when I heard a soft thumping noise coming from the back of the bus. Thump, thump, thump. Like someone or something was moving around. I turned around quickly, but there was nothing there, just empty seats and shadows. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, just the bus making noises. But I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was being watched. Every few minutes I would look back, but it was always the same. Nothing but empty seats. The bus kept driving, turning down more dark, empty streets. I felt more and more scared, sitting there all alone, not knowing where I was going. I wished I had never gotten on this bus. But now, all I could do was wait and hope it would take me somewhere safe. The bus ride felt like it was taking forever. The driver started acting really strange. He began mumbling to himself, words I couldn't understand. Then, he started driving really fast, taking sharp turns. I could feel my heart pounding. I held onto the seat in front of me, trying not to get thrown around. "Hey, can you slow down?" I shouted, but he didn't listen. He just kept mumbling and driving wild. I was really scared now. I tried to think of what to do, but my mind was all over the place. Then I noticed something on the seat in front of me. There were words scratched into it. I leaned closer to read them. "Don't look back," they said. My hands started to shake. Who wrote this? What did it mean? I couldn't help it. I looked back again, but still, there was nothing. Just then, I heard a whisper, right next to my ear. I jumped and turned my head fast, but no one was there. I felt cold all over, like someone was watching me, standing right next to me. But every time I looked, there was no one. Suddenly, the bus screeched to a stop. I looked out the window and saw we were in a forest, surrounded by trees. It was so dark, and the rain was pouring down harder than ever. I looked up at the driver, but he wasn't in his seat. He was gone. How did he leave without me noticing? I didn't know what to do. Stay on the bus or go look for help. I decided to step out, thinking maybe I could find a house or something. I immediately started to run as I got off the bus, but quickly realized it was a mistake. Sure, I may have gotten away from the driver, but out here the trees looked the same everywhere. I couldn't tell which way was back to the bus. Then, my foot caught on something. I fell hard on the ground. My hands landed on something soft and squishy. Heart pounding, I scrambled up and saw I had tripped over a large, torn-up backpack. It looked old and abandoned, like it had been there for a while. I wondered who it belonged to and what had happened to them. This made me even more scared. I wasn't just lost. I was in a place where something bad might have happened. I started running again, calling out for help, but my voice just got swallowed up by the rain and the trees. I heard noises all around me, like animals moving in the dark. I was really scared of getting lost even more, or something worse. It was cold and wet, and I was shivering. I wished I had stayed on the bus. I wished I had never gotten on it in the first place. But now, I was lost in the woods, in the middle of a storm, with no idea how to get out. I kept running, not knowing where I was going, my clothes all wet and my teeth chattering from the cold. I just wanted to find a way out, to see lights and people again, to feel safe. But the more I ran, the deeper into the dark, scary forest I seemed to go. But then, finally, I saw a light through the trees. I sprinted towards it, hoping it was something good. It was a small diner, right by the roadside. I couldn't believe it. I ran to the door and went inside. It was warm and bright, and a few people looked up as I came in, looking all wet and scared. I went straight to the phone on the counter and called the police. I told them everything. The weird bus ride, the driver who disappeared, the creepy messages, and getting lost in the woods. They said they would come right away. When the police got there, I told them my story again. They listened and wrote things down. They went to look for the bus and the driver, but they came back and said they couldn't find anything. No bus, no driver, nothing. It was like they had just vanished. I was safe in the diner, but I felt really weird. I had so many questions. What happened on that bus? Who wrote those messages? Where did the driver go? But there were no answers. The police said maybe it was my imagination because I was scared, but I knew what I saw and heard. After that night, I promised myself I would never travel alone at night again. Even now, when I think about it, I get a weird feeling. I don't know if I'll ever understand what really happened. Was it all real, or was it just my fear making me see and hear things? I guess I'll never know. But one thing's for sure, I'll always remember that scary night on the bus.